Chapter 4, Tender Wings of Desire. Once the sun began to rise, Madeline was surprised to find that she wasn't a bit tired. Perhaps the shock of running away from home had killed all desire for sleep. In any case, she knew that she had to keep moving no matter what, for if she stopped, they would probably find her, and then all of this would be over. She could not help but wonder what would happen if she were caught. Would they still make her marry Reginald? Would they simply put her in the madhouse? That seemed unlikely to her. Her parents loved her no matter what, even if she had done something like this. She thought the situation would make her feel ashamed, but instead she felt exhilarated. She was free and riding off into some unknown adventure. Surely this is what she was meant to do. When Persephone tired, Madeline went into the forest to allow her to rest and drink from a nearby stream. She had a little pocket money she could use to buy a room at an inn for the following night, now that she had gotten some distance between her and the house. She wasn't sure where she was going, but she knew that she was headed toward the sea, and for some reason that excited her. Madeline had only seen the sea once, back when she was a little girl. The memory seemed like a dream, but now she knew it was where she wanted to go. She most likely had a day's ride, maybe two, before she reached it. Then what would she do? She would have to figure that out, now wouldn't she? She took a moment and sat in the quiet of the forest, listening to the sound of the babbling brook where Persephone was drinking. Madeline almost could not bring herself to think about her family, or what they must have been thinking the moment they discovered she was gone. She could picture the look of panic on her mother's face that morning as she entered Madeline's empty room, finding her gone. She thought about Eliza, her poor maid. She would be the one to raise the alarm, right? Madeline knew that they were probably furious, at least most of them. Victoria would never understand, and though Winston had basically guessed her predicament, he would know better than to speak up in her defense when the wounds were still fresh. How will they get out from under the scandal? The thought of that made her so queasy that she had to sit on a rock by the brook to stop her heart from pounding. Should she go back? It was the first time she had considered such a thing, but immediately her heart answered with a resounding no. It was far too late to do that anyway, and she was pretty sure that her old life was now officially destroyed, no matter what happened. If she went back, her family would still be furious. Her wedding would still be canceled. And for all she knew, her parents might want her to put her in one of those asylums for hysterical girls, and she could not abide that. Her life had ended the moment she had taken that first step to run away. It was terrifying, but Madeline was going to have to find another life. That night she slept in an inn a little off the main road in the hopes that no one would recognize her, or that those who were looking for her would not find her. She was successful, luckily, but still spent a fretful night, barely able to sleep out of fear that her father would burst into her room and drag her home by her hair. She was back on the road the moment dawn hit, and she allowed herself to enjoy the feeling of riding once more. She still loved it, despite her fear since running away. With the wind in her hair and the beating of Persephone's hooves, she felt like things might end up being okay. It also helped that she had entered territory where there wasn't a remote chance of anyone knowing her, and her simple dress made her breeding hard to determine. She wanted to look like a simple woman out traveling on her own, and it seemed to be working just fine. As she rode, she could detect a certain change in the air as she grew closer to the sea. The air had a salty tang that she could taste on her tongue, and she could almost hear the crashing of the waves despite the fact that she was most likely miles away still. She allowed her mind to drift to the plain so she could have made long before she decided to run away. Should she escape to the continent? At the end, she had counted what money she had left and knew it wasn't enough to afford passage to France, or anywhere for that matter, plus food until she figured out her next steps. Madeline knew that she wanted to travel sometime in the future, but she had to be smart about it. she had to land on her own 2 feet first. The answer was simple. She would find a town, any town, and find a place to work there. The idea of actually working, earning the money that would help her live, was tremendously exciting to her. It was a destiny far from being a dudess, but it felt right. The sun was high over her head when she and Persephone arrived at the sea. Well, more accurately, they arrived at a cliff overlooking the sea, and the cliff had a drop that was dizzyingly high. She stood at the edge of the cliff, or as close to the edge as she dared, and watched the waves crash on the rocks below. It did not take long before it began to scare her, and she took a quick step back to give herself a little more distance. There was something magical about the sea. As she stood and looked out at all of it, whatever doubts she had about her life and about her choice felt as if they would melt away. Would she ever have seen such a sight if she had married Reginald? Reginald, of course. Now her thoughts turned to Reginald. He had been left at the altar 2 days ago. She did feel a measure of regret for hurting the poor man. Reginald may not have been the man that she was going to marry, but he definitely did not deserve such heartbreak. Although, was it actually heartbreak? How could Reginald's heart possibly be broken when they barely had occasion to speak? Love could not have blossomed in a short period of time, and that is not how love works. Of course, how could Madeline know how love worked? She had never been in love. She was much too practical for that. Victoria had always been the one who dreamed about the concept of love at first sight, basically ever since she first learned that such a thing existed. Madeline had always been the cautious one. Well, cautious in matters of the heart, anyway. Victoria never would have dreamed of running away as Madeline had. She relied too heavily on the world of servants and fancy dinners. Madeline could have lived in that world. Maybe she could have even found happiness. But she also would have spent a large portion of her life wondering what else was out there. What if other ways of living could have made her happy? Happier, even. She would just have to find out. But to begin, she would have to take that first step. Madeline backed away from the cliff edge and turned back to Persephone, who was peacefully grazing on the grass nearby. She walked over to the mare and gently patted her on the neck. Persephone whickered softly with affection, and Madeline surveyed the land. The cliff seemed to disappear down the road, the sea drawing closer to the land and creating a harbor where a little town was nestled, several miles away by Madeline's eye, but close enough that she could probably be there by late afternoon. From where she was standing, the little seaside town looked a bit run down, but it was as good a place as any for Madeline to start over. She swiftly mounted Persephone and steered her in the direction of the town, trotting toward what very well could be her destiny.